This is a cross-cultural literature review of Pain and Touch by Alaina Guidry
and Molly Smith.
Articles reviewed. One is by Anna Wierzbicka, and it's titled, Is Pain a Human Universal? A Cross-Linguistic and Cross-Cultural Perspective on Pain.
Article number 2 is written by David Edwards, and it's titled, The Role of Touch in Interpersonal Relations, Implications for Psychotherapy.
In the first article, the two cultures represented were Western and Australia.
In article number 2, the two cultures represented are Western and Indian.
Tables for each culture and the representation of their knowledge, tradition, and sociocultural orientation. For Article 1, Culture A was Western and the knowledge type was scientific. They were non-traditional and the sociocultural orientation was vertical individualism. For Cultural B, Australian, they were scientific, non-traditional, and the sociocultural orientation was horizontal individualism.
For article number 2, Culture A was Western, and their knowledge type was legal. They were non-traditional, and their sociocultural orientation was vertical individualism. For Culture B, which was Indian, their knowledge type was ideological. They were traditional, and their sociocultural orientation was vertical collectivism.
Methodology. Conducting qualitative or quantitative research or a mix. For Article 1, they used a mixture of quantitative and qualitative research. She took data from other research to build on her explanation of pain and its cross-cultural and cross-linguistic differences, as well as describing the quality of the research that she used.
For Article 2, they mostly used qualitative method because the data comes mostly from observation.
And for the sample selections, in Article 1, I did not see any reason that the sample might not be a representation of the population that they wish to observe because she used a variety of linguistic samples from both cultures from her research and even from other cultures such as Russian and Korean.
In Article 2, we didn't see a reason for the sample not being a representation because it wasn't valid because the size was so small.
And then did they overgeneralize or are the authors restrictive in their conclusions? In the first article, the author was a bit restrictive because she was more towards the natural thematic meta-language techniques that should be used, but her arguments were solid with her restrictiveness and being able to have a universal language for pain, and she used great examples in her argument for the interpretation of the English word of pain in the Australian terms for pain.
In the second article, the authors were mostly restrictive in their conclusions because they based their observations solely on the findings of two women and their two children.
Bias and evaluation. The variables and dimensions measured, how do they account for any language bias in their measurements? For the Article 1, it was a linguistics paper across cultures and the biases that they combat with.
Article 2's topic, touch is seen differently in other cultures, where a handshake might be considered proper and appropriate in our Western culture, but a handshake in another culture, such as the Indian culture, would be considered inappropriate or too forward.
Then, do the chosen variables or dimensions elicit dissimilarities or differences by nature of the evaluation? For Article 1, they had both by the nature of evaluation. The article explains how both cultures attempt to express pain linguistically, but the translations are different, and how this can cause issues among immigrants or travelers to other nations.
In Article 2, they were mostly differences because it was comparing two diverse cultures that have different standards of living and ways of communicating besides touch.
Conclusions. Article 1, the concluding remarks of the article is that all over the world people feel something bad in body parts and emotions. It explains the importance that not all languages have a corresponding exactly to the English word pain, and that other languages may offer some different perspectives on the range of phenomenon associated in English with the words pain, hurt, ache, and sore. She delivers a natural semantic meta-language technique to help with this dilemma across cultures and linguistics.
Article 2, the conclusion of this was that the outlook on touch and pain differed depending on the culture. In Western cultures, specifically interpersonal relationships, touch is seen as sexual and can seem too forward when meeting with someone new. With babies, in Westernized cultures, it's seen as making the baby more dependent or weak when coddled too much. But in Indian culture, a woman was observed on an impoverished street massaging her naked baby's body because to her it was dire to give the need of her touch to soothe her baby in their circumstance. While as in the Westernized culture, it seemed as more making the baby weak, while with the Indian, it's making them stronger.
And how do these conclusions fit our general schema? Our general schema is ABA, and Article 1 conclusion fits our general schema because we think it is an important issue when implementing applied behavior analysis. We need to be able to understand and identify individuals' pain when implementing treatment. This will help us become better behavior analysts.
We agree with Article 2's conclusion because going into this assignment, we knew that with such diverse cultures, we would have different outlooks on touch and pain and also other things that go in with a culture, which is why it's so important to read and study deeply about the culture you're going to visit or work with.